Well, thank you, Ian, and thank you, thank Promontory, thank IBM for sponsoring this conference this morning. GRI's annual conference is becoming the annual summit for anyone interested in moving beyond worrying about risk to actually doing something about it. Risk is core to financial services. Without risk, actually, I don't think there's much left in financial services. The financial services has tremendous IP in managing risks, and a central role of GRI is to help members think through emerging risks, moving from insight to action, from risk to opportunity. In addition to Promontory, I also want to thank Deloitte and DBRS for the support of the conference, and as Dean of the Rotman School of Management, I'm very pleased that our Masters of Finance program is also sponsoring the conference. I also want to particularly thank our speakers. GRI, I have to say, has organized a very impressive lineup of leaders in academia and industry to share their insights with us. So thank you to everybody who's taken the time to come and share their insights. And finally, I really want to thank everybody for coming. Thank you for investing in risk management. In an increasingly complex and an increasingly interconnected and multipolar world, I am convinced that increasingly how well we manage risks is going to be a determinant factor in the well-being of our societies. And certainly for Canada, and this really gets to the birth of GRI, which I'm going to say a bit about in a minute, sound risk management is a competitive advantage for Canada. And by investing in that, we can maintain and build on that competitive advantage. So thank you for coming. Thank you for making this investment. Now, for everybody in this room, I expect that 10 years ago was among the darkest days of your career. As many media articles have recently reminded us, Lehman failed September 15th, 2008, 10 years ago. And Lehman's failure was the moment that the crisis went viral. The fact that Lehman failed and the fact that the U.S. government let it fail sent the market into panic. Nobody knew which counterparties they could trust. Wholesale funding markets closed and liquidity evaporated. And in the weeks immediately following the failure of Lehman, banks and insurance companies were failing or being rescued. There was basically a few a week. Every day we went to work, we were faced with a whole new set of challenges. And you really had the feeling that we were in this downward spiral that was going faster and faster, and nobody really knew where the bottom was. It was an awful feeling. Don't worry, I'm not going to revive the crisis today. We did get through it, and I spoke about some of the lessons last year. But I'm going back to the crisis because it is an important anniversary for the Global Risk Institute. The crisis is really GRI's birthplace. As the financial system began to stabilize in 2009, a number of leaders in government and in the financial services industry put their heads together around two questions. First, why did Canada come through the crisis better than many of our peers? And second, is there something good that could come out of the crisis? Is there something Canada can capitalize on here? The answer to the first question had many dimensions, but the common thread in almost all the answers was sound risk management in the private sector and in the public sector. And their insight was that this is a competitive advantage for Canada, and that led to the birth of GRI. The idea was to create an institute to build risk capacity in Canada, to provide applied research on risk management, and to be the meeting place on risk issues for the financial services industry, banking, insurance, and asset management, with government, regulators, and academia. The idea was to increase knowledge, capacity, and engagement on risk, to bring international perspectives into Canada, and to bring a bit of Canada to the world. And with the financial contributions of the federal government, the Ontario government, TD, Manulife, and the other large financial institutions, GRI was born. Its first chair was Paul Cantor. Sadly, Paul passed away in August after a brief illness. And for all those who were lucky enough to know Paul, he will be greatly missed. Paul led GRI as its first chair from its birth to teething, through its first steps, early development, and through teenagehood. Anyone's a parent know that that's a lot. More than anyone, Paul instilled GRI with the foundational elements of a successful career: integrity, excellence, inclusion, and service to others. And few could have mobilized the financial services industry as effectively as Paul could. At a celebration of his life recently, his wife Helen Sinclair reminded us that Paul was not one to be constrained by conventional wisdom. In particular, he did not ascribe to the Rotman ICD Director's Education Program that board members should have their noses in and fingers out. Paul had his fingers in at GRI, and this was exactly what was needed in GRI's early development. Paul led with determination to turn the vision of GRI into reality, and he left no stone unturned. Paul, on behalf of everyone at GRI and all its members, thank you for your leadership, your guiding hand, your attention to detail in getting GRI off the ground and through its most formative years. Paul, we salute you. Thank you. In the 10 years since the financial crisis, there has been a whole new world of risk. Regulation, conduct, compliance, AML, operational risks, cyber, data risks, reputational, technology, and climate risks, just to name a few. And of course, we still have credit risk, market risk, liquidity risk. It hasn't gone away, and there are always new factors emerging. And today at the various sessions, the various speakers and panelists are going to touch on many of these risk elements. With the emphasis on emerging risks, the conference particularly focuses on technological disruption, cyber risks, and climate change. So permit me to make a few introductory remarks on each. Let's start with technological disruption. Now, for everybody in this room, 2007 is the start of the financial crisis. But for anyone in technology, 2007 is the year that Apple launched the iPhone. 2007 is the year Google launched the new Android platform. It's the year IBM launched the Watson project to use AI to perform superhuman feats of intelligence. And in 2008, a year later, the mysterious Satoshi Nakamoto posted a paper titled Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. 10 years after the darkest days of the crisis, mobile, the predictive capabilities of AI and machine learning, the low-cost verification of blockchain, together with big data, are transforming financial services. As global banks dug out of the crisis and began absorbing the tsunami of regulatory changes, 1,000 new fintechs were born, and these were unencumbered by legacy assets, legacy systems, or regulation. They were going to take over the financial services industry. They were going to replace the large incumbents. They were going to disintermediate the banks. As impressive as their technology has been, and as quickly as they've been able to move, what they've discovered in the last several years is that it's harder than they thought to get customers. Getting customers is not easy. And increasingly, we're seeing fintechs partnering with large incumbents who are now eager to catch up after the years they missed dealing with the cleanup and fallout from the financial crisis. At the same time, large technology companies, the so-called FANGs, Facebook, Apple, Netflix, Google, they're starting to look at financial services. Amazon has partnered with JP Morgan, Apple with Goldman. These could be even bigger sources of disruption. Time will tell. Technology has brought new opportunities to delight customers, improve services, create new services, and new business models. It's also brought new risks. Not a week goes by without another data breach. This week it's Facebook with another 50 million customers' data illicitly accessed. Scarier still for financial institutions, large payment systems like SWIFT have been penetrated by cyber hackers. The only thing more terrifying for a bank than losing their customer data is have a hacker get in and just take out billions of dollars of electronic money with hardly a trace. That's an existential threat for financial institutions. These themes are front and center in today's panels, and as I said, GRI has lined up an impressive array of speakers and experts that are going to provide their insights and share some, particularly I've been through the You've Been Hacked session before. It's very worthwhile. So it's going to be time very well spent. The second theme I want to touch on today before introducing our first speaker is climate change. I've recently been learning a lot about climate risk, and what is clear is that climate risk is different from most other risks. In particular, it's much less diversifiable than many other risks, and it also has a very long horizon, and that makes it more difficult for us to manage. I've also been learning a lot about sustainable finance, and I thought I'd just take the opportunity to say a few words. Back in April, Minister Morneau, Minister of Finance, Minister McKenna, Minister of the Environment and Climate Change, appointed an expert panel on sustainable finance. Actually, I'm the chair, and Barb Zan, who's also on the board of GRI, is a member, along with Andy Chisholm, formerly of Goldman, now on the board of RBC, and Kim Thomason at the Caisse de dépôt in Quebec. So it's a small panel. As we like to say, we're not experts on climate change, but hopefully by the time we get to the end of this, we will be. As I said, it was launched in April. The intention, so our mandate really is to engage with stakeholders across the financial services industry, as well as industry more broadly, on sustainable finance, and to sort of assess the state of sustainable finance in Canada, look at the challenges and the opportunities, and make recommendations to the Government of Canada. We are about halfway down our journey at the moment. We've been working hard on an interim report, which should come out in a few weeks, and it will really, I think, provide at least our assessment on the state of sustainable finance in Canada, reflect what we've heard from the many stakeholders that engaged with us, and it'll highlight a few areas where we think we need to roll up our sleeves and dig a little bit deeper. And our hope is, our plan is to engage in further consultations through the fall and deliver a final report in the spring. What is sustainable finance? We discovered that it's still pretty new. There's no real, there's really no agreed upon definition, but we've really defined it as capital flows as reflected in lending and investment decisions, risk management, such as insurance and risk assessment, and financial processes like disclosure and valuation that assimilate environmental and social factors as a means of promoting sustainable economic growth and the long-term stability of the financial system. As we've looked at sustainable finance in Canada, you can look at a variety of objective measures, and you can compare those to other countries. None of them are perfect, but when you add it all up, what you see is actually sustainable finance is growing actually quite rapidly in Canada from a relatively small base. But when you compare ourselves to our peers, I think it's fair to say we're not moving as fast as some other countries that have more deliberate strategies. And one of our core messages is going to be that if we want to capture this market and establish for ourselves the rules of the financial industry and help our key sectors make that transition to low carbon growth, we are going to have to become more engaged as an industry in sustainable finance. As I like to say, what gets finance gets done. The financial services industry It in itself is not going to solve climate change, but it is a key enabler of the economy. It really needs to connect the savings with investments in more sustainable outcomes, and it needs to help households and businesses manage new climate risks. As we've looked at this, we've really sort of divided our thinking into two big blocks. One, there are a number of foundational elements that markets, and financial markets in particular, need to function effectively. Those are things like clear rules of the game. We need policy clarity on climate policies. We need legal clarity on things like fiduciary duty and how that meshes with ESG factors. We need good information, and we need financial disclosure around climate-related financial disclosures. Those are key building blocks, and if you want to accelerate sustainable finance, those have to be in place. Adding other features is probably, they're going to be difficult to scale if you don't have those foundational elements in place. Once those are in place, there are a number of potential financial markets and products that could potentially spur the investments that need to be made in transition and adaptation to climate change. Those would be things like financial structures to support the financing of retrofits of buildings, our electricity grid, sustainable infrastructure, clean tech innovation. So those are some of the themes that we will be touching on, and as I said, we will, once our interim report comes out in a few weeks, we'll be launching a second round of consultations, and I hope any experts in the room and your colleagues will work with us, as I say, to move from what we call understanding to some practical, actionable recommendations for the Government of Canada. Now, the good news is, why listen to Tiff Mackem on climate change when you can listen to a Nobel Prize-winning economist on climate change? So it is my great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Professor Robert Engel. Robert Engel is the Michael Armelino Professor of Finance at NYU Stern School of Business. In 2003, he was awarded the Nobel Prize, together with Clive Granger at UC San Diego. And the Nobel Prize was really for their work on their research on volatility modeling, particularly Arch and Garch. He is the director of the Volatility Institute at the Stern School of Business. And there they have developed a real set of research tools to track risks, and they have made these available through their website as part of VLab. Professor Engel has been working with GRI for a while now. In fact, in the past, he's applied his systemic risk, risk system to rank the systemic risk of global banks and as well as Canadian banks. And in past conferences, you've presented that here. We're very pleased. Professor Engel is now working with GRI on modeling climate risks. And he's going to speak to you on how to design and evaluate portfolios that protect against climate risk, given that climate risk is undiversifiable, distant, and unfuture. Professor Engel, the floor is yours.